Karen.
How are you?
I'm good. I'm good, thanks. I thought I'd just drop in. I'm looking forward to today. And as we can see, we've got Mina Johnson-Glenberg here ready to join you for your fireside chat. So I'm going to leave you to it. Thanks so much, everybody, for joining us today at the WebXR Summit, Education Summit. And, it's going to be a great day. It's going to be a lot of information to take in. So make sure everybody's got their snacks and their coffee and their water, and get ready, sit back, relax, and let's learn together. Take it away, ladies.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you so much, Julie. I am so excited to have Mina Johnson-Glenberg with us here today. She is a researcher in psychology at Arizona State University, and I particularly wanted to have her kick off this event and to start it out because her research is very important. I have drawn on her research myself. Not only that, not only is she a researcher, but she also is a game maker. She puts her research into practice through embodied games. And she has developed a rubric for the creation of virtual reality experiences for education called Quiver. These are just some of the reasons that her work is important. It touches on all these different areas. She's not just doing the research, but she's putting it into practice. And I'm really thrilled that she agreed to be here today and to start us off and set the tone for this conference. So Mina, thank you for being here. Welcome. Really glad to have you.
Thank you. My pleasure.
So I want to ask you to just very briefly tell us about your research in large terms, in overarching terms. Can you just give us a quick intro to that?
Sure. I was trained as a cognitive psychologist and cut my teeth on researching dyslexia and how that works. And so I also have an interest in different atypical learners and how to make content accessible. And I especially have a sweet spot for STEM. So a lot of the work I'm talking about today is going to be STEM oriented. It also, you can also say things about humanities and whatnot with STEM, but I don't do a lot with the emotional aspect of VR. And that's one of the special things about VR, right? When you're transported with this presence and you feel this emotionality, it's important, but it's not something I focus on in Quiver. So I just kind of wanted to start off by saying that.
Okay, great. Fantastic. I want to ask you more specifically about your platform is not destiny. This is an article that you wrote and about comparing 2D desktop to 3D virtual reality.
Yeah. Do you have a specific question, or should I jump in?
Well, why don't you jump into that and explain your research there? I'm going to get us a better view of this slide there.
Right. So my spin-out company is called Embodied Games, and we try to make educational games that are embodied. And that means like making the learner be agentic. So they have to move and do things and manipulate content. Some people call that interactivity. You could call it agency. But we want the learner to be doing something and not just passively receiving content, be it visual or audio. So we designed this game where we wanted them to learn about natural selection, and they were capturing butterflies. And so they were playing the role of a zookeeper, capturing butterflies to feed to the birds. And so it's a pretty short experience, like 8 minutes with 6 levels. We set up 4 conditions, right? So in the low embodied condition, they just watched videos of others capturing the butterflies and getting feedback. So you see this net moves with your hand. You're agentically moving the net and making decisions about which ones are poisonous, which are not, and getting immediate feedback on that. And so in the low embodied video condition, you're watching it on either a laptop or inside the Go headset in VR. In the high embodied condition, you're actually using the Go hand controller to capture the butterflies, and you're getting that movement. Also, we have some bars that you have to pull up, and that's, an embodied movement. Up is usually more. So I'm sorry, I just got distracted with someone saying that's the best educational game I've ever found. Thank you, Bethany.
Oh, that's wonderful to hear. Yeah. Yes. I've played it too, and I first played it a couple of years ago when I organized a panel with you and Corinne Brenner and Cassandra Eng for Steve Bambury's CPD and VR session in Engage, and that was just about exactly 2 years ago, and all of you are here today. But yeah, Catch a Mimic is really an exciting game, and I learned from it myself. I found it very engaging,
Nice.
and I know that's because it is backed up by your actual research.
And so, yeah, what you would do in the high embodied one is you're capturing things, you're making decisions. And so we randomly assigned, these were college students. The game's made for like 6th grade on up, but college students in these 4 conditions, they were all matched at pre-test. And it was interesting because, yes, everyone learned about natural selection. We saw that, a giant gain in learning. But what we care about are differential learnings, right? So in the next slide, you'll see that the groups learned differently at post-test. And if I could see the next slide. And this is where the story is, right? Because at post-test, focus on the solid lines. Those are the VR conditions. And in the black high embodied solid line, they're learning the most, right? And they're maintaining that at 1 week follow-up. But the low embodied VR is learning the least. And I found that fascinating. The dotted lines are on a PC, a 2D PC. And it doesn't matter whether they're high or low embodied, they're doing the same. But if you're in VR and you're not being agentic, then learning will suffer. So there's something deleterious about being passive in a VR headset, which is why one of my main design takeaways is like, let's make the learners move and do something and have agentic control over content, because you're going to get more learning bang for the buck if they're in a 3D immersive VR headset.
I find that fascinating. We talk about presence and immersion and the effect of VR, but really it's this agency and embodiment and being able to actually do things that makes it effective as a learning tool. Is that right?
That's my takeaway. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So having agency matters. And, if you don't have agency in like a 2D desktop setup, it's not such a big deal. But once you're in this immersive environment, you need to try to design that in, is what I would say.
Great. Fantastic. Yeah. Thank you. And can you talk a little bit about your process of building Catch a Mimic? I know that you have set up Embodied Games, and how long did it take you to put that together? I know you worked with a team. What was that like?
Yeah, this is an interesting genesis story, because it didn't happen in a normal way that it was designed for VR. It was actually designed as a tablet game, which is why it's on my website. You can just play it for free, like on the 2D setup on a desktop, just click and play with the mouse. It was first designed as a tablet, and then afterwards, after that research was done for an IMAX movie, actually, I was like, let's put this into VR. So, it was fun, the things you had to think through. Like in the tablet, it scrolls left to right. But in VR, why don't the butterflies come out of a central bush and head towards you, right? Like let's take advantage of the funness of 3D. So like redesigning it, it's a really different, you have to think spatially, as you know, everyone in the audience. If you're designing for VR, you've got to think in 3D. And the team I had, like now I use a lot of student designers, but back then I hired a professional, I had a professional dev to do it, and a 3D artist that I found in Phoenix where I live. And we just, as a tight team, worked together on it, iterated left and right. As you know, you've got to play test. Like that's difficult to find 5th graders to play test with, but all that takes months and months. And so when people ask me, how long did it take to make? Like, it's hard to say from soup to nuts, because it started in a different platform. But yeah, I'm actually the one we're working on now, an engineering game, is taking just like over a year. Just
wow, yeah.
Forever.
That's exciting to hear that you have an engineering game coming up. Are there any others that we can look forward to now, or is that your primary focus at the moment?
Wow, I am really digging into that. It's about tuned mass dampers, and it's very visual. And you start an earthquake to make you agentic. You take the hand controller and start a sine wave that comes out of the hand controller and hits a building and makes it shake and shatter. And that's how one of the ways we're putting embodiment into that.
Wow, that's really exciting. I can't wait. I can't wait to see it. And I know that you are working on a WebXR version of Catch a Mimic, right? That will be coming
Yes.
soon, right? Yes. Okay. Okay. Wonderful. Let's talk a little bit about Quiver. And Quiver is a really important tool that you developed based on your knowledge. Sorry, let me move to the correct slide here. It's a quality of education in virtual reality rubric. And this is a resource for people who are designing games that are intended to be educational, so that they can test what it is that they are designing and make sure it meets these criteria. Did I get that right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. And so the Quiver is broken up into multiple sections. The two of the main ones, one of the two main ones is the pedagogy and content. And so some of the things that it asks you to assess are learning goals. Um, can you talk about that, sort of what that assessment looks like, and some of these other items here in the pedagogy and content section?
Definitely. And at the end of the slide, I hope we have the link to where this is. It's a chapter in a book, but it's also on the Embodied Games website under blog tools. So if you just want to print out the PDF that has the 20 items on there, that's available. So I try to design this for teachers. I know there are a lot of teachers and educators in the audience. So if you're trying to decide, wow, is this going to be a good module for my class? Like, you want to know, does this module contain these certain things? And so you would watch it and then you score it 0 to 3 and then you tally it up. And, you know, if it has 100, it's great. But I've never seen a module with 100 points.
Wow.
So, I mean, even the Catch a Mimic game, I think it came out at being 76 points. So it's, you know, trying to help educators decide, does this module have the things that we know are good for education and learning? And I think if I redo it, and I'd like to, I think I'll get it down from 20 to 12 because that's a little onerous, like assessing 20 items. But here we go. I'm going to quickly just chat through the 20 really quick. Learning goals, basic for a learning module. Some modules forget to put the learning goals in there, so got to have that. Is the content enhanced by 3D or having presence? And so this is supposed to get at the ideas like, should it even be in VR? Like, that still costs more money to make. So maybe it's okay on a desktop, right? So is there something about the content that's spatial and 3D that VR is going to help it?
Absolutely.
Is it pushing transformative learning? Is scaffolding there? So this is super important. As designers know, you've got to scaffold the complexity in your module. Start simple and build up. That means also with the UI components, but also with the cognitive concepts that people are dealing with.
Mm-hmm.
Is there active learning, right? I just talked about that. Is there embodiment? Is there manipulating of content for the user? That's what I mean by active.
Right, absolutely. And continuing in those 10 items in the list of pedagogy and content items in Quiver.
So if you have an action, if you have a movement, is that action congruent to the learning, right? So you wouldn't want to have when someone's pulling up the sliders to make a prediction about something low, medium, or high, you would want this to be the action. You wouldn't want it to necessarily be towards the screen or down. Down shouldn't be more. That's what I mean by congruency.
Yes, and that I know is based on some of your other published research that I have read about that congruency of the gesture and making sure that it matches what you're doing. Really important, and of course we can do that in VR, right? It's less easy to do on desktop.
Yeah, I mean, of course, if you have 9 degrees of freedom, like there's a lot of room for congruency, getting it right and getting it wrong. So that's one of the reasons I'm super excited about VR is like the ability to use the hand controllers and to locomote when possible. Guided exploration, we know this from education research that free exploration might be good for the first few minutes, but once you're in it, once you're in a module, you need to guide people like what's important to look at and what's important to learn. And so you have to put some guidance in there. Metacognition prompts. This one's a little tricky because to make people think about their thinking, sometimes you have to put text on screen. I always try to not put too much text in VR. So you might have to prompt them with text, like make a prediction, what's going to happen next. Or sometimes you have to say, okay, try to self-explain this. That's a good metacognitive prompt, but it's does it take you out of immersion, right? What if you had to take the headset off and turn to a partner next to you and discuss what just happened? It takes you out of immersion, but it's making you think deeper and evaluate what you just did. So I don't have a great answer about what the best cognitive prompts will be, but we should be putting them in there is what I'm saying.
Yeah, and let's face it, that for many people and for most of us, you don't want to be in VR for too long, right? So so having those short, impactful bursts and then being able to process what you've done and reflect on them, I think helps to cement that learning. And so that's the sort of thing that you're talking about there.
Yeah. Yeah, and just rule of thumb in our lab, we don't make things that are longer than 20 minutes. So, yeah.
Good. Yes.
I think people could go an hour, but I don't feel good after 55 minutes. So feedback, that's super important. You want to give immediate feedback close to where they made the mistake or did something right, but you don't want to give it all the time, right? And that's distracting. So to find a spot for feedback. And assessment, try to put assessment into the module that you've built, either at the end or in the middle. I think assessment's really important.
Great. And so then we go on to the mechanics of the experience.
You know, I was about to say, oh, these are obvious, but they're not. I mean, I've been on so many bad experiences, like, especially remember in the early days, everyone was like, try this roller coaster.
Oh.
That's not a good experience. And you don't want to get everyone on a flying carpet either. So design for visual comfort, design for taking into account cyber sickness. And we know that agency helps with that, right? So if you're using the hand controller to be in control of where you're going and what you're doing, that attenuates a feeling of cyber sickness. Put in interactivity and manipulability. And so here in mechanics, that means the amount of, the frequency of it. So I've already said earlier, put it in, and now I'm saying how often is it there? And then I have 2 items on avatar creation. This is another place where we need more research in the field. Like, how much more do you have buy-in if you've created your avatar, or if you've created just the color of your hand that shows up on screen, and how many choices should you have? We don't want people to get lost in 20 minutes of avatar creation, but so this is an active research field that I find pretty interesting.
Yeah, I think that really is interesting. And some of the things that you just said there points to the importance of making sure that avatars can represent people as they are, right? So to make sure that they represent diverse populations, that you can choose the color of skin that you want, your hairstyle, et cetera, body type.
And I see that Enrique just said, oh, yeah, gamify it. You know, I try not to use that verb because A, it's sort of looked down on in academia, but B, it means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. So I review VR papers constantly, and people will say, here's our VR game, and all they've done is put 4 stars at the top. Like if you're getting 4 stars in what is basically a simulation or learning task, that sequential learning task, that's not a game to me just because you're getting a star. So I don't say gamify. I mean, clearly I believe in giving stars, that you get that in the catch a mimic game. And I feel good about calling that a game because it is a fantasy world and you're capturing these butterflies and there's a little narrative storyline. Like a game needs to have some short narrative. It needs to have a goal. It needs to have good sound. So
all these things. Yeah. It's great.
But you could have a great learning module that's not a game. That's what I always say. I'm like, I don't get too caught up in the what's a simulation, what's a game.
Yeah.
So can you go back one quick?
Oh, sure. Yeah. Okay.
Sound. How is the sound? How are the haptics? Do you have vibro-tactile or any other modalities? Are they active in the module? Engagement. It can hit all these points, but be sort of boring, not that engaging and repetitious. So. And then I finally, number 20, I like that a lot because that is just what's other, what's missing? What would you want to see in there? So you could either ding it and give it a 0, or it's done a really good job with like equity. So you give it a 3. So that's an important catch-all, I feel.
Great.
Add those up. And then these are the bonus items because they're not in there yet in much VR, but they should be. Make it adaptive, right? If the learner's really flailing, then make it easier. And if they're doing really well, bring out the harder items. And then collaborative. So I'm excited about that. That is coming. That's coming, collaborative. So,
right. And and the adaptivity may have to do with the incorporation of things like AI into it. may involve that. So take us further. We're heading down those paths, right? And the collaborative nature, I certainly think is important, and is related to the having avatars, right? So I'm going to ask the team here to provide this link in the chat to the Quiver rubric. If you can do that, I would be grateful. And so and teachers can use this if they're thinking about incorporating a tool as a lesson, supplemental instruction. They can use this rubric to assess the experience or the game or whatever it is, and that will help them to determine whether it's a quality educational experience. So this is really helpful. We don't have many of these sorts of resources, and coming from you as a distinguished researcher in the field, we can have confidence that it is a good measure of the quality of these experiences. Yeah, great. So, Mina, I'm really glad that we got to talk about these things that you've done. You mentioned the engineering game that you have done. What is some of the other research that you are currently working on?
Well, in this engineering game, one reason it's taking so long is that we're also making it an experiment, because that's my lifeblood. And I like to do experiments and see what works and what doesn't and why it worked. And so we'll get some young engineers, like freshmen, in there to play the game and put on EEG as well and ask them questions about cognitive load. And so, the idea is like, how does this experience with all this embodiment interact with cognitive load and with enjoyment? And so they'll be reporting these things. And so we'll have this, like, the three legs of the stool, like what's their behavior? What are they getting wrong? What are they reporting? And then what is the EEG telling us about when they're feeling overloaded? And so I'm interested in that research because it helps us better design content. That's all I want to do, is make better VR content for education.
Right. And so are you suggesting that the readings that you're getting might not match what you were being told verbally, and there might be a reason not to trust that?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's one way to think about it. You would want them to correlate, right? When they say this is getting harder and more effortful, you would want to see certain waves change. Yeah, there's a lot of individual difference in that world too. So we hope to start that in September. So I haven't collected that data yet, but just fine-tuning the game and making two different versions of it. And yeah.
Okay. Fantastic. Yeah. And so where do you see more generally the future of research like yours into XR experiences for education? Where are the needs? Where do you see it going?
Well, thank you for asking that, because as I said, like I review a lot. And so I'm reading these articles. I guess there's three things I'd like to say about, like, sort of on the research side going forward for our field of people who love VR and education. I guess I would like to see more sophisticated control conditions. Like a couple of years ago, people were doing like 2D VR on a desktop versus immersive VR. And that was okay. We needed to figure out what that difference was. But I'd like to move beyond that and not make static slides be the control condition, not make 2D video. They're not really equitable. There's too many differences, like presence and object occlusion in 3D, reality intrusion. So if I'm on this desktop here, I'm seeing people walk down the hallway. That you don't get that in VR. So I don't like that as a control comparison anymore. Let's move beyond that. Let's try to understand specifics of designing for immersive platforms, right? So make your control condition be something that's in an immersive headset, but you're changing certain degrees of freedom in there. You're looking more fine-tuned at what's working and what's not. Does something blinking, is that a better way to get you to move down the hallway versus, I love this study done, Bailenson's group, like versus like a bird flying or a dog barking or a blinking sign, right? Like those are the kind of studies I'm more interested in reading about. If you're going to be doing research in there, please give a pretest, right? Because we want to look at gains, right? So give a pretest and a match post-test, and then we can do that kind of A/B design and see what really changed from being in that experience. So a lot of people just give a post-test, and I think, yeah, it's important to get just a quick pretest in there as well. And then finally, I would say that if you are going to be gathering some data, let's get some what we call subject variables, right? Let's find out like the user's prior knowledge of the topic, their comfort with technology. I would love for people to be getting spatial skills, like just a 10-item test on what are your spatial skills going into VR, because we think that VR is going to change them and make them better, but it depends on the content and how long they're in there. So that's another active field of research. Like how can VR enhance spatial skills, which we know are plastic, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then once you gather those subject variables, you have to run something called an aptitude by treatment interaction, which is difficult if you haven't been trained in that. But I guess what I want to offer to this audience is like, if you have that data and you want help analyzing that information, I or my students would be happy to look at that with you and discuss that with you.
Wonderful, wonderful. And yeah, I will just pop up here your contact information so that people can reach out to you. I'll leave that there briefly. And that was a wonderful offer that you just made. So yes. So that's really great. I think that we have time now for a few questions from the audience. I don't know if we want to have Julie come back on and sort of give us a sense of what sorts of questions the audience has been asking. And I know that Julie, you too have, I'll bring her on there. Julie, you too think a lot about spatial awareness. So yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Spatial awareness and design, it's the key component that we really need to focus on and use the tools that are out there to help people understand and conceptualize this new immersive space that we're designing and developing. So we do have a couple of questions. So let's address them. And somebody's asking, SappyDev is asking, would this framework work for behavior change as well? Have you seen the learning translate to action as well from your research?
You know, we just did a mixed reality experiment that was really fascinating. It wasn't in VR, but it was a 3D printed barrette. So a chemistry experiment where you're turning the little handle like this to make the drops come out of a barrette or not, or you're using keys on a keyboard. And the students who were randomly assigned to the turning the 3D printed barrette like gave better verbal recalls of titration experiments. So it was interesting. So there is something about doing an action that can help your recall of it. Lots of research on embodiment, but not necessarily in VR, right? Because that's a new world. So as far as behavior change, there's a lot of literature on social skills change, like especially with children with Asperger's, that it's been helpful in VR. So I don't do that. I don't do behavior change. I do cognitive change, but it is out there. Yeah.
No, that's great. And it comes back to repetitiveness, right? Of just and building the right logical thinking and the right, thinking about things being done in a different way as well, right? Not only are you learning, but you're also learning how to do it in a new process. So
it could be new, or it could just be like think about learning traces in the brain, right? You're adding another multimodal signal, right? Like generally we learn visual, auditory, but now if you're adding the body and the sensory motor signal, it's a whole nother learning trace that can be strengthened.
That's great. Yeah. We have a question from Enrique Cachafiero. Hopefully the future sees these isolated experiences coalesce into VR educational conditions, one that is holistic and encompasses certifications. And I'm going to bridge into that. And maybe can you highlight how certifications are kind of changing right now that you've seen?
Yeah, I mean, I've watched that world out the corner of my eye for years. And I remember the very first time, like, was it Mozilla badges? I was like, I don't know about that. I don't know if anyone will buy the idea of badges. But now I do feel like it's taking off. And I'm very positive about it and believe that micro certs will be a wonderful thing.
Yep. And that can obviously go into more conversations, because I'm already seeing how certifications are going to be honored with NFTs minted for the blockchain, and that definitely goes into a lot of other conversations. But thank you so much today for joining us, both of you, Karen and Mina, for joining and kicking us off today. Hi, Steve. How are you? Welcome to the show.
I am well.